Hello, I'm Attorney Todd Leneve. Welcome to West Virginia Gun Law. Today is part 3 of my series of speaking with my friend, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA coach Josh Fowler from Morgantown, West Virginia. And in this segment today, we transition from talking about the elements of self-defense and the perspectives of a martial arts instructor on self-defense that focuses on the techniques you take into the street. And we shift to this idea that in a defensive encounter, you, by necessity, are essentially claiming victimhood as a result of actions of an aggressor that you didn't invite. You didn't create that scenario that led to this defensive encounter. And so as part of establishing a viable claim for self-defense, it's critical that we be able to go into court and establish right from the outset that there was never any question, and shouldn't be any question, that you were the victim of somebody else's decision. You weren't the bad actor. You weren't the one who created this problem. You were the person who was going about your daily life and got victimized by somebody else. And so we take a look at Josh's approach to establishing victimhood through the training and techniques that he uses and teaches from his children's classes all the way up through regular adult programming. And we talk a little bit about some of the perspectives of establishing yourself as the victim, setting the frame for your case right from the outset when you have your first contact with authorities, whether that's through a 911 call or otherwise. But we take, I think, what's a fairly interesting look into Josh's perspective on victimhood in this segment. So join us here for part 3 of conversation with a BJJ and MMA coach. I hope you're enjoying the series and look forward to your feedback on this one. Stick around.
Process of establishing yourself as a victim, and this is something I tend to focus on in my classes, especially even like in the little kid class where we're doing bulletproof for the kids. Bully, not bullet. One of the kids is like, "You're going to make me bulletproof?" I'm like, "No, dude, that ain't going to happen."
Love kids.
And but yeah, bullyproofing and everything is we do a lot where, like, if someone is starting something, this doesn't apply to someone just jumping out and just grabbing you, or jumping and just you're getting jumped, like dark alley kind of thing, or multiple people, and like you don't have the ability to either verbalize or de-escalate. Right. This is where this is an ego fight, and I'll talk a minute about ego versus assault.
Ego
fights.
is a huge part of
it. Is
every legal encounter almost that I've ever dealt with.
Yep. So we I tell folks to establish themselves as the defender. So the first thing we tend to do is I tell them, start with your hands up and open and near your head, because if you have to use them, you're going to be close at hand for your shields.
Sure.
And so we have our palms out, our hands open in a non-threatening fashion. And then the first thing we do is at the top of our lungs, we go, "I do not want to fight." So for the little kids, it's, "I don't want to fight." And we practice that over and over. We put our hands up, "I don't want to fight." And then when the bully shoves them, we go into the drill.
And let me just interject a point on that real quick. And I think it's a great point, especially with young kids, sort of inoculating them to this idea that, look, we really do want to avoid.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, it's not so much that it's self-defense, it's assault prevention. How do I get away from this? Yeah. And we want to instill through training, and that's what I try to do through the legal courses that I present, try to instill this idea that, look, the last thing you want to do is get into a fight. When we're talking about ego, when we engage, often, when I sit and look at the details of an encounter that took place, it's ego that led to the engagement, where somebody may have been able to withdraw. And it's real important to throw in here as well that under West Virginia's law, we have no duty to retreat from an encounter like this. I was going to ask that too.
I figured that we still had that.
Yeah, no duty to retreat. But even though we don't have a duty to retreat, I always counsel people, retreat ought to be the first option that you consider. If you can avoid the fight, man, everything's better, bottom line.
Yeah.
In a scenario involving you, I'm pretty confident that 96, 98% of the people you'd encounter, you're going to come out on top. But I know from knowing you that you don't want that.
No.
It's just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And so I like to really emphasize the fact that, saying things like, hey, I don't want to fight. I don't want any part of this. I'm not looking for trouble. That's so critical that, one, it be genuine. One of the worst things to do, and this was, I think, one of the little catch lines that was taught, a couple of decades ago. I was in fear for my life, and so I shot. At the time, it was probably effective. Now everybody knows that, and it's absolute, swill. It's garbage, and nobody listens to that and says, "Oh yeah, this guy's being genuine." So I think you want to be cautious.
It's been played out.
Yeah. So I think you want to be cautious when you're even saying, "I don't want to fight." When you learn to say that in jiu-jitsu, right? And a good savvy prosecutor is going to take that information and they're going to twist it and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, where did he learn to say, oh, I don't want to fight?" In a class where he's learning to fight. And so you have to understand that even these efforts to learn how to protect ourselves are going to be used against us in court most of the time. And that's another reason why it's so important to have an attorney who's well versed in this to be able to counter those types of really just red herring arguments. They're garbage arguments, but they're going to be made. But don't ever say, "I was in fear for my life, and so I defended myself." A more genuine statement is going to go a long way. And I think you're absolutely right in teaching these kids from the outset, let's establish that I'm the victim, that this is a self-defense scenario. And we'll talk maybe a little bit later about 911 phone calls and how that's really a great opportunity to first establish with authorities that this was a self-defense scenario. Begin to frame the case before anybody else has a chance to. So we can talk about that here in a bit. But yeah, that's great that you're teaching them, hey, hands up, so you're ready to defend. But hey, I don't want anything. Look, man, I'm showing you my hands. I'm not, keeping one behind my back on a weapon. I don't want to fight.
And I always say that one of the reasons that we do this, one of my old instructors always said, you have a duty to establish your witnesses. So if there's anyone around, whether it's other kids in school or if you're on the sidewalk and there's somebody messing with you, if there's other people around, you're establishing your witnesses. You can say, they can be called to court to testify, and then they say, well, dude, yelled at the top of his lungs, he didn't want to fight, and he had his hands up, and they see this.
Right.
And nowadays, all the damn cameras around. That, when that's that, it's really hard to say that there's anything aggressive about this.
Right.
It's not like I'm like this,
right.
knuckles up, and I don't want to fight. Well, that looks like you do, though.
Right.
But, so we always try to, that's why I really try to emphasize that to people, is establish your witnesses. And that's one of the beginnings of, again, I'm not a lawyer, he is, that's one of the beginnings of, your case, if you have to make it. But if that works, I don't want to fight, and they leave you alone, what are the odds of that? Then, no harm, no foul.
Right.
Fighting is risky. I mean, you were kind of alluding to that. The amount of time that you're in an altercation, it exponentially increases your risk of injury and death.
Absolutely.
Right? We think of, the best example I've heard of is we think of male lions. They get these big knockdown, drag-out fights. But the thing is, they give up really quickly because they're expending resources that they need to survive. So when the young lion takes a run at the old lion, he knows he doesn't have a pack. He knows that if he overextends himself or gets injured in the fight for the pride, that he might die afterwards.
Right.
So a lot of times these fights between two big lions actually end real abruptly. And so, like, that's something that I also tell people is don't extend the confrontation once it starts. You know, don't extend it even before it starts. You know, don't try to reason with that person. Don't do any of that. They're not in it for the rational conversation.
No, not at all.
They want your wallet. They're angry about something and they're taking it out on you. You know, and that's kind of what happens.
Yeah. Now, my firm belief is that you can do all the training you want. You can carry a firearm. You can be versed in martial arts or some other combative skill in order to be prepared for that absolute worst possible scenario. But the better outcome is to be able to get yourself away from it and walk away without any encounter taking place, knowing that if it had, you were going to be the one who prevailed.
Yeah.
And so you don't have anything to prove. If you can check your ego, you understand, I was going to win that fight. No question in my mind, I was going to win that fight. But I won it even harder by never getting into it in the first place and denying that idiot the opportunity to do something to me that I didn't want done. I didn't want to have to deal with that. Am I capable of it? 100%.
Right.
You know, you put your hands on, I'm walking away, not you.
Yeah.
But I don't need to prove that because I know it.
I just spent 2 hours in the gym fighting guys 50, 60 pounds heavier than me. Do I want to leave the gym after training and have some idiot come up to me and be like, and start shit with me? Where I'm like, dude, I'm tired. I don't want to do this. Like, when I say I don't want to fight, I mean it. I'm 47.
Right.
You know, I ain't old, but I ain't young either.
Right.
And I'm sitting there trying to beat up kids, you know, 2-3 times, you know, 19, 20, 25-year-olds, you know, a couple times a day, all through the week. The last thing I want is some idiot starting shit with me.
Right.
And then, so like, okay, dude, I'm already sore. I'm already tired. I'm just going to take you down and just hold you there and humiliate you because it's the least amount of effort possible, you know. And
I throw in a little wet willy while you're at it.
Like, pinch your nose.
You shouldn't have messed with
Got
me.
your nose. You know, so I always think, you know, we always think of like, you know, what's the old man solution? We always go back to Raiders of the Lost Ark, where, you know, Indiana Jones, you know, the guy's swinging the sword around, he just pulls out his gun and just shoots him.
Right.
It's just like, that's what we, you know, after a certain age, that's all you ever want to do. But
everything else hurts.
Yes, right. Yeah, don't mess with an old man with, you know, free time and anger.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that's a good point.